what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, August 30th, 2017, getting on to the end of the month here. Middle of the day, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Powwow on a Friday and a bunch of insanity. Now, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and today Ken is in our control room answering the phones and keeping us out of trouble when you call on in. Before we get into the news, though, as most of you probably know, yesterday was my 65th birthday. I'm officially an old codger now, and I wanted to thank everybody who sent birthday wishes and donations and everything, but by far, the most unique gift I got from one of the show's listeners was this package of artifacts from Palestine, and I'm sorry the people on RBM can't see it. This is where the BAM user people have the advantage. It's these picture postcards, black and white, printed in Palestine from the 1930s and 1940s, some Palestinian postage stamps, and these two remarkable books, both of which I think ought to be in a museum, and I'm going to try and forward them to the appropriate party. This one is called The Guide to Samaria by R.W. Hamilton. It was published in Jerusalem in 1944 by the government of Palestine. Apparently it's an official travel tour guide. And then another one called Land and Landscape, The Face of Palestine, which is just a picture book, black and white, of all these pictures from 1936 through 1940 Palestine. And it's just an amazing look back at what was going on. And what is really unique to see in these books, this being before the creation of the nation of Israel, is seeing all these pictures of Muslims and Jews living side by side in perfect peace and harmony. And there is a lesson to be learned there. So thank you very much for these. These are truly unique. And as I said, I'm going to try and find a more appropriate home for them than my dusty bookshelf. All right, we're going to go right to the phones here. We got a call already. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Hey, that makes a great addition to the coinage you got from Palestine, too, right?
It absolutely does. I think I'm going to bundle. There is a museum of Palestine over in Israel, and I think I'm going to contact them and ask if they want all this stuff and just bundle it up and send it to them like I did the political buttons to the Smithsonian, because I am 65, and at this stage of my life, I'm less interested in acquiring stuff than giving it away, lest some of these items wind up in a landfill following my untimely death. So, yeah, it's time to start finding new homes for some of these collectibles. I don't know who would want the debris collection, but for the rest of it, I'm sure that there's going to be somebody somewhere with a museum that would welcome some of this.
Hey, Mike, I don't know if a lot of people are aware of this, but there's a chemical plant in Texas called Arkema.
Yes.
And they're in, like, the process of maybe exploding, and they're evacuating their residents. And I was just watching the news. In addition to that, all the tables and just chairs in people's houses, and everything is garbage. Where are they going to fit all this land, like for landfill? Where are they going to move all this garbage to? It's just like, I never seen so much stuff from like two houses. Imagine like there's like thousands and thousands of houses. Man, it's a wreck over there, Mike.
It is.
I feel really bad.
Well, I'll tell you what they really ought to do is, rather than take it away to a landfill, is just make it a landfill right there. You know, crush it all down and basically raise the ground level so it's no longer an inundation zone. You know, plus 500 years from now, there'll be some student archaeologist striving for tenure who's going to hit that the remains of this disaster and say, "Yee-haw, I'm published."
Hey, Mike, I seen there was like some disagreement on either to evacuate parts of Houston or some, I don't know what the exact deal, but it's hard. Storms are unpredictable like anything else, so it's kind of hard. It's hard to evacuate like half the state or whole state. I don't know. But, I mean, can you imagine if they decided to evacuate halfway through the storm? All those people would be trapped in their cars, right?
Yeah, if you're already into the storm, it's too late to order the evacuation. And it isn't so much where the storm is going to go, is where it's going to flood. And it is possible to compute where the inundation zones are simply on the basis of a topographic map and knowing where the water is going to flow. That's even a big issue here in Hawaii because of storm surges and tsunamis. And as a matter of fact, down at the bottom of the hill, there's this one little shopping center that when the sun and the moon are either on the together, new moon, or full moon, opposite side, there's actually a little bit of flooding in that parking lot at high tide. It just comes in from Pearl Harbor, and, you have to just drive through the water, and that's just everybody shrugs and says that's, part of living in the tropics.
Yeah, it's a real wreck over there. It's going to take a long time to recover, but I know, didn't they shut down a gas oil plant also? Because all the pipes would be starting to corrode by now, right?
Well, it all depends on how they're coated and protected, which I imagine for an expensive asset like a refinery, they're probably pretty well protected. But my understanding right now is there are already 4 major refineries that have had to be shut down, and as Harvey moves along the coast into Louisiana, we may see even more shut down. So there's going to be a major spike in gas prices because there's going to be a huge shortage.
They just found a white van full of 6 people dead that got stuck in the flood.
Yeah.
Children and so they're going to be finding more. A lot of people, not a lot, but there's people who even went back into the attic. Don't go in the attic.
Not unless you got an axe and can chop your way out through the top there. I mean, that's what killed so many people in Katrina. As a matter of fact, odd coincidence here, Fox News just flashed a little lower third that said Harvey has disrupted 15% of petroleum production here in the United States of America. That is a major impact, and it's going to be felt at the fuel pump. You're going to see supply chain issues where these trucking companies can't get affordable gas and diesel. The effects of this are going to be felt all over that mainland.
And Mike, one more thing. I watched somebody say they used to have, throughout the years, they had 160,000 more acres of sponge, of land that was taken away to make the concrete jungle per se. Now, that would have helped absorb not all the water, but some more water, right? The more they build, the worse it's going to get, right?
Well, it depends where they're taking the dirt from. And, there have been some very short-sighted operations where they will just scoop out huge amounts of land and literally create an area that's guaranteed to be an inundation zone. But, they're thinking about where they're building it up rather than where they're taking it down. And the other issue that people don't pay a lot of attention to, because we're even seeing this out in places like Long Beach, California, they're pumping so much oil out from under the ground, the entire landscape is sinking. Of course, Al Gore's down there saying the oceans are rising and it's all the fault of Ikipu humans, but you can't pump all that volume of petroleum out from the strata and not expect it to sort of sink down a little bit.
It's the same with when they do the gas, in Ohio, it causes tremors because, remember, once you pull it out, there's that pressure is released, so the ground is going to drop down or move, and it's very simple if you just think about it.
Yes.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates here. So getting on down to Texas, and I do feel really bad for those people, and it's going to be decades recovering from this. Look over at Louisiana. They still haven't finished recovering from Katrina, and Harvey is already looking like it's going to wind up being worse. They're already at something like 52 inches of rain, and more is still coming down. Some of the shelters are beginning to flood. There are at least 30 dead, 30,000 homeless, and $160 billion estimated destruction. And people are starting to say that Harvey is the worst natural disaster in U.S. history. I find it hard to argue against that. Now, Houston's mayor is starting to impose curfews to deal with the looting. Now that they're mandating evacuation from certain neighborhoods, especially to the east of those reservoirs that have now overflowed their limits, the problem is apparently the looting is really getting out of control, and people are going out in boats and breaking into abandoned homes and stealing stuff. They don't have the police force to go on out there and deal with it. So now they're just going to have a citywide curfew that starts at midnight and ends at 5 a.m. to try and deal with the looting. There's another concern that there's been so much volume of water moving around the pylons that some of the bridges and roads and rails are compromised and could fail as well. So it's a major, major, major disaster down there. Now, Hurricane Harvey has damaged ExxonMobil refineries, and this has allowed hazardous petroleum pollutants to leak into the environment. And that's another reason why they've had to shut off some of these city municipal water systems. And then you have places like Best Buy are out there charging an arm and a leg for a case of water. I actually got a letter saying, hey, it's the law of supply and demand. It's not really gouging. It's just smart businessmen taking advantage of an opportunity. No, they're taking advantage of a disaster. And there are some people who are out there who are doing amazing things to help their fellow Texans, and there are people out there just exploiting this to make a fast buck. More about this in a little bit. Now, as I mentioned before, Fox News is already saying Harvey has basically reduced U.S. petroleum production by 15%, which shows you how critical Texas was to our oil infrastructure. And basically, there is a level of reduction in oil that could bring the entire U.S. to a halt. Not enough fuel to get trains and trucks to their destinations. They're not even going to start the journey. Now, as Dustin was mentioning, there's a chemical plant in Crosby, Texas. It belongs to the French industrial giant Arkema SA, and it is evacuating workers due to the risk of an explosion because Tropical Storm Harvey knocked out the power, and just like in Fukushima, they didn't have the backup generators up on pylons. They flooded, and they have stopped. And the situation at the chemical plant is serious. They're working with the Department of Homeland Security in the state of Texas to try and figure out a way to control what's going on because the plant produces explosive organic peroxides and ammonia. They got hit by 40 inches of rain. And these chemicals this factory produce are not chemicals that react very well to water. It produces methyl mercaptan, ethyl mercaptan, dimethyl sulfide, and methyl mercaptopropinaldehyde. These are industrial chemicals, and especially when you look at some of them, again, they really will. They'll explode on contact with water. All right, so let's take another phone call. Keith in Montana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
You know, Mike, as I heard about that, I was thinking of that Bhopal accident in '84.
Oh, man, was that horrible.
Yeah, it affected over 500,000 people. Nearly 3,000 died instantly, another 8,000 in 2 weeks, another 8,000 in 2 weeks, plus the massive amount of disabilities. And of course, out of all of it, only 6 people, 7, I guess, were charged, but 1 died. But 6 people were fined $2,000 each and got 2 years in prison.
Well, that one, if I recall correctly, was Union Carbide, and
Ready, yeah, same thing, yeah.
And basically, that plant produced dioxin, and because of that, you still can't go in there, because dioxin is the gift that keeps on giving. And we've got areas down on the Big Island where they were testing Agent Orange, which is based on dioxin, and you still can't go in there. And we're talking about, back in Vietnam, the 1960s to today, you still can't go in there.
Well, remember, they in Bhopal there, they said this all started with just a little bit of water being infused into other chemicals, and it acted as a medium to boom.
Yes. No, some of these chemicals
anyway,
are...
I sent you...
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I just had to say, I sent you another email about another firm that's doing some scalping on this disaster down there. A leftist group that's taking the money from people.
Oh, yeah, I think I know the one you're talking about, the Women's March.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about that. I find that absolutely disgusting.
It is. Anyway, Mike, my best to you and Claire, okay?
All right, thanks.
We have heavy smoke here in Montana right now. We have, last time I checked, I sent you an email about that too, by the way.
Yeah, all the wildfires over there.
Fires here.
Yeah.
It's bad. And they continue to burn, so I had to go and get some Sudafed just to breathe.
Man, that is really bad. I remember some of the Southern California wildfires. The only thing we're dealing with right now here in Hawaii is we had thunderstorms last night, but at the moment the skies are clear. All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Let's talk about some of these people who are responding to this disaster and the needs of their friends and neighbors in different ways. As you know, this preacher, TV preacher Osteen, initially refused to open his megachurch to house hurricane refugees. And Joel Osteen put it on out and said the church is inaccessible because of the flooding, and people who were near the church said no, the roads are open, everything's fine. And finally, public pressure forced Osteen to open his mega church to hurricane refugees. However, he's now gone on a campaign saying that everybody has to donate $50 minimum to help cover the costs of potential damage to his church and blah, blah, blah. And he's turning it into another money-making opportunity. Now, that stands in contrast to a guy named Jim Mickingvale, and this guy owns a bedding furniture store. And this gentleman, Jim, basically opened his 2 stores to makeshift storm shelters, and even more, used his furniture moving trucks to go and get the Harvey victims to his door. And so you have this picture of all these survivors of Hurricane Harvey, and they're basically bedded down on brand new furniture and mattresses in these stores and being cared for. And you know this guy's just going to have to write off all the furniture and the mattresses. He's not going to be able to sell that as brand new now. That's a write-off right there, and he didn't care. His company's called Gallery Furniture. Now, that's a guy who walks their talk about a sense of responsibility to the community. And if I were anywhere near him, I would say, yeah, I'll go buy a used sofa or mattress from you. The Houston Best Buy has been caught selling cases of water for $42 each after the hurricane. That is absolutely shameful. And yes, I know Best Buy is in the business of making money, and Best Buy and I have had our disagreements in the past. But where is your sense of humanity? Now, there is another concern, and that is the fact that in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey, you're going to have all this pooled up dirty flood water. You're going to have mosquitoes like crazy. You're going to have infectious diseases. The floodwaters have likely dredged up sewage, chemicals, waterborne germs. Health and Human Secretary Dr. Tom Price has declared a public health emergency in the state of Texas on Sunday due to the extreme hazards from the hurricane. This is real wrath of God type stuff out there. And there are too many people out there saying, oh, the Texans deserved it because they supported Trump. No, what a ridiculous thing to say. Now, the other day when this was really cranking up, I was talking about the possibility of Texans not having flood insurance, because flood insurance is one of those things where it's very affordable if there's no chance you're really going to need it. Claire and I live basically on the top of a hill. We could get flood insurance for pennies. We don't need it, obviously. People who live in an inundation zone obviously are going to be charged a lot of money, and as it turns out, a majority of the Texans living in the flood zones from Hurricane Harvey do not have flood insurance. And this is going to place a huge financial strain on the budget for Texas, which is already under strain from all the illegal immigrants and refugees. Okay, so let's talk about this Women's March. This Women's March is encouraging people to donate to organizations that specifically help non-white groups after Hurricane Harvey. Talk about a cynical exploitation, where they're out there saying, you've got to open up your wallets and you've got to help the black victims of Hurricane Harvey and the brown victims of Hurricane Harvey. But for the whites, to heck with them. They'll take care of themselves. We don't need them. Let them go off and drown. And, of course, Twitter just absolutely uncorked on this lady in a big way. We'll take a short break for our sponsors, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about the Women's March, which is out there literally saying that everybody should donate to help the black survivors of Hurricane Harvey and the brown survivors of Hurricane Harvey and the women survivors of Hurricane Harvey. But those white males, let them drown. And now there's a story that's come out from Wayne Dupre's website basically saying that Linda Sarsour is taking what donations are coming into the Women's March, and they're not going to any survivors at all, but to leftist political organizations. So it's just another scam. Now, if you are wanting to help out the people in Texas, and I applaud you if you do, there are all kinds of legitimate charities that you can go to. They're all over the web, or if you actually know people in Texas, just send them a check or send them some cash. If you go through one of these big organizations or these political organizations, there's a good chance the money is not going to get there. And, of course, already the various foundations, the charitable foundations, they're drooling over Houston. It's going to be the next Haiti. They're going to raise billions of dollars for a relief effort and put most of it into their pockets. Believe it or not, the Houston Director of Governor Relations has approached Chelsea Clinton for expertise on the relief effort. I'm sorry, Chelsea Clinton isn't an expert on the relief effort. She's just a name value individual. And if the Clinton Foundation is coming on in to Houston, they're going to do the same job for Houston they did for Haiti. Another group called Charitable Humans is refusing to provide assistance to people in Texas because it's a red state. Okay, let's take another phone call here. Roxanne in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, good afternoon, or morning, whatever it is for you. I live one block from, it's called Lakewood Church, and it used to be our sports center, and they concerts and whatnot. That thing's a massive building. It's up very high. You can look at it on the web. And it's got tall stairs, and I'm one block from it. In our neighborhood, we were very lucky this time, not like Ike, because we lost roofs and whatnot. Not on our particular complex. Trees went down all over. And this time, we didn't lose power. We only had just a little bit of water in the street on Saturday. So I know that he's putting out, well, they couldn't get the... But there were videos on the web, too, you can see on YouTube, about the young man went up the steps and the doors were locked. This is the 28th. Well, in Mattress Mac, Mac and Vale, he's been a long-time pillar in this community. He's got a couple controversies, but he's been through, they had arson at one of his stores. He's actually opened 3 for the evacuees. He's opened 3 of his stores. And let's see what else. But he's a long-time resident helper of the community. Joe Osteen, his wife slapped somebody on Continental. They're just weird people, very iffy, you know. And this is going to change something for him. But they're still, now they open the doors, and they got tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of clothing and diapers, you know, the supplies for the evacuees.
Well, good, finally.
So anyway, I just wanted to tell you that there's some controversy because I live right here, and I could walk to that place. Anyway, you have a good show. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch to Mo in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Can I change the subject, talk about the dollar, or is that okay?
Yeah, but we're going to come back to Harvey here after you're done.
Okay, all right. Well, I know that was a subject, you know, but I just wanted to get your opinion on this cryptocurrency thing with, do you think it's a government you think the government started it up, and that's their way of herding everybody into this ether? And because you say, everything is about the paper and ink, and these wars and everything. And sorry for jumping the gun. I never really got your full opinion on it because it's still kind of new out there.
Well, actually, I've stated.
I've followed it since it started.
I've stated many times, and we're at the end of the segment here, so I'm going to have to let you go. The cryptocurrencies have evolved out of people wanting an honest money system, but the government and the bankers are moving to co-opt it, and it's too easy to manipulate. Anyway, Mo, we're going to let you go. Take a break for commercials. Back with more phone calls. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I'm watching on the news here right now, and apparently Congress is getting ready to vote up or down on a package of assistance for the victims of Hurricane Harvey, and there is apparently an attempt to link it to an increase in the debt ceiling. In other words, raise the debt ceiling or no assistance for the people in Texas. They're holding those poor victims of Hurricane Harvey hostage to get the debt ceiling increased. All I can say is, come on, children. Get back a sense of proportion. I watch these people in Congress, and no matter how cynical I get, I just can't keep up. Okay, we're going to go back to the telephones here. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, thank you, Michael, for bringing attention to the scam of charitable organizations, and especially those associated with the government. And all we have to do is look at Hillary Clinton and her little Haiti effort and all the money that was scammed there in her foundation. But I'm glad you brought attention to that.
Well, it wasn't just the Clinton Foundation.
We can also be reminded of the trillions of dollars that have been ended up missing when government had their hands on it, and nobody ever investigated where that went. So I'm not don't have a lot of confidence in the United States government when it comes down to charitable organizations and donating your money to an effort when they can't seem to keep track of anything.
Well, it's not just the Clinton Foundation. There's an article that we posted that we linked to from ProPublica about how in 2011 the Red Cross launched a multi-million-dollar project for the victims of the Haiti earthquake, and they raised $500 million, and they only built 6 homes. And the rest of the money just went away to administrative costs and advertising, whatever else it went. And yeah, these big organized charities, they pay their managers huge salaries, and they're really not all that effective. If you want to do good in your neighborhood, go on out and do good in your neighborhood. Don't just send a check to somebody on the TV and think that you've actually accomplished anything, because it really doesn't work. Claire and I, when we're involved in the hungry population here, we go on out. We go, we used to go on out and buy the bread and take it down to the food distribution. We can't do that anymore because it's on the same night as Claire's choir rehearsal. But we're involved in other ways where we know for a fact what we do gets to the people who needs it. All right. Anyway.
I agree with that 100%. I found out here in Northern California, I think RBN actually, John Stadmiller had put something on the website about charitable organizations and how much money actually goes to the cause versus administrative costs. And I found that Salvation Army had the best record of the money. I think 75 cents of every dollar went to the cause itself, and 25 was used for costs. And that's where I normally go. I did find out that the Goodwill paid their CEO, I believe, $3 million. And when I realized that I will never donate any of my used goods to Goodwill anymore. It either goes to the Salvation Army, or if I'm in Utah, then Deseret Industries does a fine job of making sure the money goes to where it's supposed to go, and the items are sold at a very reasonable cost to the consumer. I find that Goodwill actually they really get it for free. Of course, it's a huge profit, and then they really don't discount it for the people who really could use the item. They actually just to below shelf price sometimes.
Yeah, they are, and very often with the fact that it's used and everything, you're getting a raw deal there. Plus, I happen to know somebody who works at the local Goodwill, and they say the people who work at the Goodwill, the really good things that get donated, they just take them home.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, we are not done with Harvey, unfortunately, because it has already made a second landfall in Louisiana after leaving Texas, Houston, this huge, huge mess. And so it's basically going across Louisiana, across New Orleans, and they never really did recover from Katrina. So it is probably, I'm in agreement with those who say this is the worst natural disaster in U.S. history, although I would have to say probably the New Madrid quake was worse, but there was hardly anybody living there when that one happened here. All right, let's grab a phone call. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
What's on my mind is big business.
Okay.
You know, big business in Texas gets a pass on this. I mean, you got the conglomerate oil industry down there that makes so much money every quarter. It's absolutely staggering. I mean, they could just pocket change would bail out this whole mess. So what we got here is like going into the grocery store and you buy your $500 worth of groceries for the month for you and your wife and 2 kids. Then they ask you if you want to donate for the food bank. And you know what I'd like to say? Why don't the grocery store just write the check? Okay? We have enough already on our plate to have to be paying for this crap. You sitting there asking us for money at the register. Big business is getting a pass, and it's very cleverly done on the media. You don't want to bring the issue up, but these businesses could easily pay off all these troubles, and it wouldn't even hurt them. Just barely wouldn't even hurt them. So we got to think differently in this country and stop letting the billionaire class and the 100 millionaire class get away with murder in this country, and they are. You know, so anyway, that's all I got for today, Mike. Thanks for taking my call.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And apparently, the co-founder of Home Depot, Ken Long-On, is basically stepping on in to help with the cleanup efforts after 9/11, and he is on the warpath against the price gougers. So apparently, if you're trying to clean up and repair your home in the aftermath of the storm, Home Depot is not going to be raising their prices, if I read this correctly. All righty. Now then, in response to that caller who was asking about Bitcoin, we just put up this article at whatreallyhappened.com. It's from Government Slaves. Apparently, Princeton researchers have discovered that Bitcoin transactions are not, in fact, anonymous, that there is, in fact, a mechanism in place where they can be tracked back to you. And I know that was one of the big attractions of Bitcoin, the promise of anonymity. It isn't there. Okay, now then, remember the march to D.C.? They were going to start from Charlottesville, Virginia. We're standing up against racism and against the Confederacy. And they started with nearly 200 marchers Monday. Basically, yesterday they were down to just 35. And so it looks like that has already fizzled. It looks like that whole, the latest round, the latest chapter in the let's get the Confederacy and let's stir up racism is losing traction. More about that in a bit, but we're going to grab a phone call. Kathleen in Paris, aloha.
The hungry population here. We go on.
Okay, Kathleen, are you there?
Yeah, Michael. Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine.
Oh, well, you know, it's just so crazy, this. Well, hello, Michael?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Michael?
Yeah, I hear you.
Oh, well, I want to say hi, Captain, my captain, and you are my teacher. And have you ever heard this term? It's something like when the student is ready, the teacher arrives.
Yes, I know that's kind of considered an older model of education.
You are my teacher.
Well, I'm glad I finally showed up.
You showed up, and you are my teacher, and I listen sometimes, and then I think, oh, I have to go back and I have to listen again, and so I do. And then I take notes, and I write notes, and I learn so much from you that
anyway, I want you to know that I am also a teacher, and coming in October in Paris, I will be a teacher in this organization called Philotechnique. It's something like what we would call in the States a community college. But in this one, all the teachers are volunteers, and I am a teacher of English there, but I am going to promote you and all your ideas, and so you are going to carry on,
Kathleen,
in France.
Kathleen, I would be very, very careful about that because of the very restrictive laws passed by the French government. I don't know how the French government feels about me and my site specifically, but I'm telling you to exercise the appropriate caution, because there are people who have been in places like schools and so forth who have mentioned my website, and they have gotten into some really major trouble, including the loss of their jobs. So please be very, very careful before you do that.
The thing is about this particular, it's an association, and all teachers are volunteers. And I am a volunteer. And so, you know, volunteers are difficult to fire.
Yeah, but they can still be asked not to be a volunteer anymore.
That's true. However, I'm going to ask for my lectures to be videoed, and I just want you to know that you have taught me so much, and I had a day this week where it was like punching your fist in the air when I got it, and it had to do with oh God, Hitler, and it had to do with, oh God, I'm sorry, I've lost.
All right, well, listen, let me just finish up, because we have another caller I want to get to right now. Kathleen, I'm very honored and flattered by your words and your comments, but again, I wish to caution you about, you know, being very careful talking about whatreallyhappened.com in your place of, I know it's not employment, shall we say involvement, and that also applies to everybody else out here listening to the radio show. I know at the end of the radio show I say share what you know with who you know, but obviously doing that in your place of employment, especially if it's an educational or media entity, can be hazardous to your financial health. And so please exercise the appropriate caution. Exercise the better part of valor, if you will. Kathleen, thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to switch to Terry in Oregon. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. I just don't know if you talked about FEMA yet, but I remember when George Bush appointed the political appointee to run FEMA, and then we had the hurricane down in New Orleans. Do you have any feedback on how their performance is so far? And isn't this, aren't they supposed to be the main organization that's supposed to come in and take over? We've got a national emergency here down there.
Well, my understanding is they're doing a much, much better job today than they did back on Hurricane Katrina, that they were able to learn from those past mistakes. And again, part of it is that FEMA is actually part of the continuity of government structure. And certainly when it was formed, was more focused on protecting the government in the event of an emergency than protecting the people. Obviously, following Hurricane Katrina, they have been, at least to some extent, retasked. And my understanding is they are on the ground there in Houston, and they're doing a much better job. They're not having to go around to the Red Cross asking for donuts like they were during Hurricane Sandy. But they are doing a much better job, is what I'm understanding.
Okay, Mike, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
All right, bye-bye. We're going to let you go here. The phone lines are now open. Now, here's an interesting little story. As you know, Republican Representative Dana Rohrabacher had a meeting with Julian Assange over there at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, at which point Assange told him that there was no question that the DNC emails were leaked and they were not hacked by Russia, and Assange apparently gave him the information, the proof, the documentation, and now Rohrabacher is trying to get that to Donald Trump, and we keep hearing that the White House Chief of Staff is literally trying to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't see anything that's going to upset the establishment, and so apparently Dana Rohrabacher is having to literally work to try and get some kind of a meeting set up with Trump so that he can share this information from Assange on the DNC hack. And if there is this much resistance to a simple meeting on this, then obviously more and more people understand it was never the Russians. It was just another one of these lies that they fed us to try and get us to hate the people we're supposed to hate, and that it was an internal leak, and in all probability it was Seth Rich. We know Julian Assange implied it was Seth Rich, and that he was murdered for leaking this information out to the public. It was a political assassination. And I just hope that Rohrabacher stays out of small aircraft. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Brian in Georgia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I wanted to mention this. I hadn't heard much about it since Trump tweeted it out a couple of weeks ago, but it was right around the time that he said, we're going to step up the wars, we're not backing down, we're going to take on the rest of the world. He sent out a tweet where he said, Ron Paul is right that we are wasting trillions of dollars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I got to say, when I read that, I just fell out of my chair because I almost thought it was like Trump trying to signal to his base, like, look, I don't want to go along with these wars. I know what the score is, but, I'm compromised. I've been threatened. I was just stunned to see that tweet, him even mention Ron Paul in a tweet about the wars.
Well, yeah, there have been a lot of very obvious conflicts between what is being tweeted and what the official line from the White House is. And at one point I thought maybe they had somebody sitting on Trump's Twitter account on his behalf. But in this case, I think your analysis actually does make sense. We know that Trump is being controlled because everybody around him is lying to him, and maybe he's picked up on that, and he's trying to find a way to push back on that. But it's very, very troubling to find out the president that we elected has already been controlled, contained, and isolated. Brian, we have to let you go and take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go right back to the phones here. Ahmed in Turkey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mr. Rivero.
Yes.
Mr. Rivero, I listened to you for the last 10 years almost, and among your listeners, I agree with Peter from California mostly. I have a theory that America is controlled completely by Israel, and Trump was a choice because they gave him all the publicity. And if it wasn't, they could fix it with that ballot counters, ballot machines. And if you have other idea, please prove me wrong that it is not so.
Well, there is no question that Israel holds a tremendous influence. I wouldn't say it's total control, but a great deal, inappropriate degrees of control over our government and our media. The fact, though, is that as near as I can tell, Israel would have preferred Hillary Clinton as president, because while Donald Trump is grudgingly going along with Israel's agenda, Hillary would have been enthusiastic about it. And I think Israel really wanted Hillary, but they figure they're able to basically control Donald Trump and get what they want from him anyway. It just takes a little more work.
Mr. Rivero, I told you last time also, when it was from Paul, they wouldn't give him the light of the day. They wouldn't let him in the TV shows or the debates or anything. Trump, from the first day, got all the publicity. including in your program. Not that I blame you for the support in Israel.
Well, actually, if you go back and you look at the history of the primaries, Donald Trump was being basically marginalized. They put all the focus on Jeb Bush. They put all the focus on Ted Cruz. They put all the focus on every one of those GOP candidates was being put front and center. Trump was being shoved off to the side. There were many cases during the early debates where Trump was over on the end of one row, and then when they ran the photo of the debates in the newspaper the next day, they simply cut him out. So Trump did not have the focus of the media's attention until it was unavoidable that he was going to win the primary.
Are you saying that they couldn't fix the ballot counters, those machines, which it was in their hands?
Well, election fraud can shift the result of an election a few percentage points, but it can't reverse a landslide or everybody knows what happened.
It wasn't a landslide, Mr. Rivero. And even if, let's say, 3/4 of the country, 3/4 of the country voted for Trump, if they did it the other way on the ballot boxes, I don't think there would be a revolution. They could do it. Nobody knows who voted for who.
Okay, well, Ahmed, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for station identification. Back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And let's go to a phone call. Ramsey in Canada. Aloha, Ramsey. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, sir.
Hello.
I have a question. So look, the other day, sir, I looked at this YouTube video done by this guy named Robert Revolt, and it turns out that he's a host on RBN. He speaks on once a week on Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
And he had this guest on named Brandon Martinez, and so they were saying that the people on RBN and the independent media, Paul Greg Roberts, and all these people who talk about Putin, all of these people have been sucked in, that claiming that Putin is against the globalist agenda and the New World Order, and that guy on that host said that Putin is just along with the globalist agenda, and so United States, Russia, United States, like they're playing good cop, bad cop, and Putin is in bed with the Israelis. The guy said that Putin is a crypto Jew, and so on.
Okay,
what do you think of all that?
I think it's an attempt to smear and discredit Putin in the eyes of those of us who do, in fact, see him as standing up against the New World Order globalists. And I think one of the strongest indications that Putin is not going along with that is the fact that Russia and China and these other countries are starting to create their own alternative international financial system, which is a direct threat to the Western dollar-centric system that they were all hoping was going to be the foundation for the New World Order private central bank. So if you're creating a New World Order global government, you don't need a good cop, bad cop situation. You just come on in and say we're a New World Order now. But there are going to be people who fight back against that. We're seeing this refugee crisis has sparked a huge surge in nationalistic fervor in countries all over the world, including the United States of America. And clearly Russia do not want their economy absorbed into a global economy, because Russia sees how these private central banks work. That's why they kicked the Rothschilds out. And the Rothschilds are a main driving force of this globalist New World Order, because their goal is to enslave all of mankind into a global private central bank for all eternity. And obviously, if Putin is kicking the Rothschilds out and has freed his country from the Rothschilds' private central banking system, then very obviously that tells me he's not on board with their plans. Okay, and I'm getting a message here from our control room that they're saying that nothing like that was actually said on Robert's show Sunday night. So I don't know where you're getting your information. You may have been listening to another network instead. Okay?
See, sir, this I saw this on a YouTube video. Like, it wasn't on the actual show. It wasn't a live show. Like I never heard of it until I saw the YouTube video. The YouTube video.
Okay, calm down. You sound like you're going to have a coronary. Okay. Don't need to get defensive here. We're just trying to sort things out. But in answer to your original question, I think it's a lot of nonsense. And the people who want the global new world order, they're going to attack anybody standing in their way. They're going to smear them. They're going to try and sabotage public trust and confidence in them. Right now, Putin is enjoying a tremendous popularity around the globe because he is a statesman and he is standing up to the globalists. So, of course, they're going to come on out and scream that he's tap dancing barefoot on shag carpeting or some other kind of nonsense. Ramsey, we're going to let you go here. Get on back to the news here. And thank you very much. Now then, there is a story that is coming on out where apparently Imran Awan still has an active secret email account on the House of Representatives computer system, even though he's officially been banned from the congressional network. And somebody discovered that he's got a second active email address, which as of yesterday was still operating. And apparently it is tied in with a House staffer who specializes in intelligence and homeland security matters for Indiana Democratic Representative Andre Carson. So this is starting to spread way beyond. It's beginning to look like we've tripped over a gigantic espionage operation. And the big question is, was this operating independently and parallel to what Hillary Clinton was doing with her private email server, or was it just part of a single larger operation that is just now beginning to come to light? Now, story coming out of Blacklisted News, new Senate bill targets WikiLeaks, Russia, the independent media, and the First Amendment. And going from that Russian meddling narrative, using that as the pretext, the Senate is embracing what is called the Pompeo Doctrine, which is basically moving to stifle and criminalize WikiLeaks and, by extension, any such dangerous transparency-providing entities that threaten to cast doubt on Washington's official stories. What? Me? Apparently so. It wasn't all that long ago they were screaming that we were all arms of Russian propaganda. Getting on back to that idea of smearing your enemies. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. There is a new White House petition calling for the release of the FBI documents in the Hillary Clinton case, which the FBI is withholding on this ridiculous claim that the public just isn't interested. Yes, FBI, we are interested. Unfortunately, this poll appears to be rigged because when I signed it and they sent me the link to confirm my vote, the link to confirm my vote would not work. And as a matter of fact, I'm looking at that page right now. It's got fewer votes on it than when I first went into it. So yeah, they're rigging the petitions at the White House petition site. What I think is going on is that Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, was in fact repeating the 1994 Chinagate scandal. She was selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests, using her private email server to deliver the goods, and her charitable foundation to collect and launder the payments. And the scandal of that magnitude could bring the entire federal government down, and that's why everybody is trying to protect that secret. Not because they like Hillary Clinton. Probably most of them don't. But they just want to keep their own jobs and their cushy paychecks and their perks and all that wonderful fluffery that goes with being in the federal government. And so they're circling the wagons on that. And that's why we've now had 2 attorney generals in a row refusing to prosecute Hillary for Title 18 violations. Now we've got 2 FBI chiefs in a row working to suppress the evidence and keep it hidden. There is some huge, ugly, dark, rotten secret behind all of this that they are absolutely scared out of their minds that you're going to figure out. And government always has this idea that anything that perpetuates their power is okay to do. lie, cheat, steal, kill. It's for the greater good. We must keep the nation moving forward. No, what they're talking about is they want to keep the government moving forward. They want to keep their paychecks flowing. They don't want to be held responsible for what they've done. Now, in the middle of all this investigation into Trump and Russia collusion, which has so far been devoid of any evidence, it has now become unavoidable that the Podesta group, run by Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, John Podesta, was in fact engaged in pro-Putin lobbying that was never reported to the Department of Justice. And Mueller is now he's having to look at that, because everybody's making a stink about it, and the Podesta group is busy retroactively filing all the notifications saying, oh, it just slipped our mind, really, there's no ill intent here, so you can't charge us. Amazing. Now, over the last few days, I've been commenting about how Antifa and Black Lives Matter, because of the way they've been behaving, are actually undermining their own effectiveness, trying to get race riots going, trying to fan up racial discord, trying to divide us against each other. And it's stumbled rather badly. Now, when you're out there trying to bring about real social change, the last thing that you do is make yourself look bad in the eyes of the general public. You have to have popular support to really bring about change. Again, imagine if during the American Revolution, if George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and the other boys had gone into the colonial schools and just randomly shot students as an act of terror, do you think the revolution would have been won? No, it wouldn't, because there would have been no popular support for the revolutionaries. Well, whoever put together and organized Antifa and Black Lives Matter apparently didn't study this aspect of what revolution really requires to operate. And so Antifa are out there, and Black Lives Matter, and they're behaving in a way where people are saying, I don't want to be associated with them. I'm not going to carry that flag. I'm not going to wear the bandana. I'm not going to dress the way that they do. They make the rest of us look bad. And now we're starting to see the media and Antifa's supporters abandon them. Yesterday, the Washington Post surprised their readers by turning against Antifa for violently assaulting no fewer than 5 conservative demonstrators at a rally in Berkeley, California on Sunday. Remember back on Charlottesville, and they were out there trying to sell this idea that the conservatives started the violence? Even though anybody looking at the video could see that Antifa and Black Lives Matter had arrived with shields and clubs. And then Trump comes on out and says both sides are wrong for initiating violence or resorting to violence. And everybody went ballistic. No, you've got to condemn the white people. The black people, they're standing up. They're fighting back for years of slavery. Newsflash, none of those people have ever been slaves. So the Washington Post is turning on them. Nancy Pelosi, amazingly enough, is now condemning Antifa, calling the violence in Berkeley a sad event. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog. The Antifa violence becomes a problem for the left-wing activists. It's causing a huge image problem for the liberals, just like all the rioting and the ruckus after Donald Trump won the election, and they were out there causing vandalism in towns in California that had actually voted for Hillary. But the heck with that, we're going to smash some windows. And it didn't work back then. It's amazing somebody thought it might have a different outcome this time. No, it didn't. So let's turn to the war zones. Apparently, the Syrian army has advances northeast of Sukna, and they're basically, if the reports are confirmed, the Syrian Arab army and its allies are now in striking distance from the ISIS-held village of Kabaj, located about 50 kilometers from Deir ez-Zor. Everybody's focusing on Deir ez-Zor. That's where the final battle for Syria is going to be fought. And what we have here right now is U.S. troops in Syria are now battling anti-Assad rebels once funded by the CIA. It's amazing. Nobody knows who's fighting who over there. The U.S. ought to just get on out. They can't make this work. They're not going to win it. It's time to call it a day. The war planners blew this one badly. Staying in it is going to result in a major, major, epic fail for the United States of America. Now, for the first time in the last 6 years, the armies of Syria and Lebanon are in control of the entire shared border. For the last 6 years, it's been bored through with ISIS terrorists and all these other people flipping back and forth, the way they, during Vietnam, and everybody was crossing the border into Cambodia and back. Well, now Syria and Lebanon have locked down that border. ISIS has basically agreed to just take their POWs and leave here. Interesting little comment. This is coming out of Ynet News about how Netanyahu's whining and crying over ISIS surrender, and he has been, because Netanyahu had it in his head that ISIS was going to destroy southern parts of Lebanon, southern parts of Syria, and just hand it over to the U.S. and Israel. And that didn't work out either. And unfortunately, when Netanyahu doesn't get what he wants, he takes it out on the Palestinians. So I'm expecting an airstrike into Gaza at any minute. All right, let's take a phone call. Don in Iowa, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yeah, as far as that Charlottesville deal, you know, Trump, as it turns out, Trump was the only one that kept a halfway clear head. Everybody was, you know, you can't try a guy, you can't accuse a guy of murder, rush to judgment, you know, and try him in the press. The guy has and this guy with the car, he didn't run into people. He wasn't running after people. If you look at the videos, he was going down the road. He was trying to get the hell out of there because apparently he'd been struck in his windshield. People were hitting his car with baseball bats. So, but he didn't hit any people. He hit, I mean, if you're driving down the road and you see a car, you expect the car to get the hell out of the way, right? I mean, everybody does, especially if you're mad and you're a little bit scared and stuff. But he ran right towards those cars there, and he never struck a person, I don't think. He struck the cars. There were two cars there, and then the girl was killed apparently by the front car that he ran into. But what were those cars? They weren't legally parked in the middle of the damn street.
Well, you also had all the demonstrators were right there in the middle of the street. They weren't on the sidewalks. And so
that's not legal. They had no permit to demonstrate in the middle of the street.
That's right.
So, I mean, Trump was right about that. And then after he hit those cars, then, people were jumping on the back of his car. Well, he hit those guys. What the hell is he supposed to do? What the hell is that young man supposed to do? Besides that, I mean, that's why you don't hear anything about this. What are they going to try him on? We don't know.
Yeah, this whole thing has fizzled rather badly, and whether if it was the opening shot in the color revolution or simply trying to kick up race riots as a distraction from what else is going on over with Hillary Clinton and Podesta, but it's obviously stumbled very, very badly because the American people have been manipulated and played with so many ways by this government, they're not going to go along with it anymore. People look at this stuff in the news and they're saying it's another government psyop to get us to do what they want.
Right, and you got the internet. They can't lie like they used to because there's umpteen videos on YouTube that'll just show you what happened. You can decide for yourself. Okay, I'll let you go, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Coming up here on a commercial break here. Now, the United States has just admitted they have been using an air base in the United Arab Emirates to launch strikes into Syria and Iraq. This is coming from DoD Buzz. It's a military website, and they're using the Al Dhafra Air Base. This is 20 miles south of the capital, Abu Dhabi, and they're using it to basically launch airstrikes into these countries, apparently most of them from the 380th Air Expeditionary Wing. Now, this is a great story. You're going to love this one. Apparently, there was an 8-year-old girl Hallel Halevi in the Israeli illegal settlement of Halamesh in the West Bank. And she found this coin. And everybody got really excited because it looked like it was this 2,000-year-old silver coin from the Second Temple period in Jewish history. And, of course, the government of Israel, all the way up to Netanyahu himself, seized on this, saying that this coin proves that this is our land. That proves that this is our ancestral home. And they were just really out there. Unfortunately, experts looking at the coin said it is not 2,000 years old. It is not silver. It is, in fact, a copy of a coin that you can buy at the Israel Museum. Apparently, they're in the gift shop. And somebody bought one and they dropped it, and somebody found it and said, oh, it's proof. This is supposed to be our land. And they went totally ballistic over this thing. And now they've all got egg on their faces, as is deserved. All right, so we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now let's turn over to North Korea, where apparently, again, the U.S. government is trying to put pressure on China to rein in North Korea, and China keeps coming back and saying, it's not our job. If you've got a problem with North Korea, you deal with it. We're fine with things the way they are. But China has said that, yes, the situation in North Korea, the tensions have reached a tipping point. We're one mistake away from an outright shooting war here. Now, of course, Nikki Haley is over there at the United Nations saying something has to happen. You know, how dare North Korea test a missile? All right, Nikki, here's your rifle. Here's your parachute. Want your head on that transport plane. And she's out there making a big deal saying that no country should have missiles flying over a nation of 130 million people like Japan. Well, Nikki, you incredible nincompoop, any nation that tests long-range missiles, and that includes the United States of America, flies them over other people's territories on the way to the target. It is unavoidable. Take a look at a map of North Korea and the Japan archipelago. There isn't any direction North Korea can test a missile that doesn't go over somebody's occupied territory. That's just the way it works. It's amazing how do people with this little understanding of the issues, of the technology, get into these high positions? That's what I want to know. Okay, let's see. Russia Today has an article that even without nuclear weapons, military conflict with North Korea will turn the South into a desert. And what they're trying to remind everybody about is there's been so much focus on North Korea's development of nuclear weapons and their missiles. And what everybody forgets is that because North Korea has basically been in a state of arrested war with the South Korea and the United States for half a century. They have been building artillery like crazy and tunnels in which to put that artillery where it can't be bombed from overhead. And if war comes to the Koreas now, South Korea is just going to get pounded into dust with conventional artillery. We really don't want to go there. Now, Kim Jong-un is out there saying there are going to be more test missile launches. And he's out there trying to basically say, we have this working technology. And please take it into your consideration for your plans. And the current missiles are designed to counter what North Korea sees as a U.S. threat emerging from Guam. Because North Korea is already aware that the people of Guam are very uncomfortable at being made inadvertent targets in this argument between the United States and North Korea. In fact, more and more people in Guam are saying they want the Americans to get out before something unfortunate happens. And North Korea has now demonstrated a capability to be able to target Guam and is clearly sending a message saying that if the U.S. launches an attack against North Korea, part of their response will be a counterattack on Guam. And even as Nikki Haley is out there screaming about how North Korea should not be allowed to test a missile, the U.S. Navy conducts a missile test right here in Hawaii, yet another one. And basically they shot down a ballistic missile from an Arleigh Burke, the USS John Paul Jones. And they were able to shoot that down from right here over in the next island, Kauai, the Pacific Missile Range Facility. And so there is this hypocrisy of where our missile tests are fine. They're reasonable. We have to make sure this stuff is working. We want to make sure it's going to hit its target. But, oh, North Korea can't test a missile. How dare they prepare to deter an attack? They're not allowed to do that, according to the rules we just now made up. Meanwhile, Russia has issued a formal condemnation of the U.S. attacks against Venezuela, which at the moment are in the form of an economic war. But Russia understands what the U.S. ultimate agenda is going to be. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And the children are attacking my web server right now, as they generally do this time of day. Now, over the last couple of years, from time to time, we have seen indications of what are called trans-atmospheric aircraft or spacecraft. These are a cross halfway between an airplane and a true spaceship, in that they are, at least for part of the flight cycle, air breathing, and they'll go up to the very top of the atmosphere and they'll just skip along. And there are these amazing videos taken from the ground of these obvious plumes coming from some kind of an engine, and the plumes keep spreading continuously, indicating that they're at or near the absolute vacuum of space. And everybody's wondering who's developing these things, and they've got to be absolutely amazing. We keep hearing talk about scramjet technology. Well, now we're hearing that Russia is starting to put together, this is in the Daily Mail, Russia's 6th generation MiG-41 fighter is apparently going to be a trans-atmospheric vehicle and capable of briefly leaving the atmosphere, literally traveling in space, and apparently it can be operated with or without a human pilot. Now, of course, having had a stick and rudder in my hand, I think that latter part is not as much fun. But that sounds like an absolutely amazing system here. All right, let us talk about the economic news, because the indicators are still not good. Doesn't matter what they say about the Dow Jones or all the other indicators. It's all a bunch of lies. It's all a pack of lies. How they calculate the rate of inflation, how they calculate the unemployment numbers. It's just more puffery to try and fool you into thinking everything's hunky-dory, the government is doing an absolutely bang-up great job of everything, and you should just sit still and breed more soldiers to send into the wars here. We're seeing an article, this is from Investment Watch blog, where the soonest that we can expect a U.S. recession from current levels is going to be about 4 months. So there's a window of opportunity for you to endeavor to prepare. It's not going to happen tomorrow. They're saying here 4 months from now. But you better be preparing. Just like those people in Houston should have been preparing for Hurricane Harvey. And they're doing a flyover now of damage in Beaumont, Texas. Yeah, it's a mess. Hurricane Harvey is an absolute object lesson on the value of being a prepper. Now, there's another article, this came out of Zero Hedge, about how the shale oil miracle is turning into a debacle. And basically, the shale oil phenomenon was an attempt to avoid some unpleasant realities, which is the idea that there's going to always be ample oil supply to support our current lifestyle, and that it will always be affordable. And that is most assuredly not true. And so this shale oil was an attempt to harvest oil which earlier generations had said it's simply not worth the trouble. And they're not getting the return they thought they were going to get. And with oil prices having previously been depressed, many of these shale oil companies were operating in the red. Some even went out of business. Now, obviously, with Hurricane Harvey having shut down, at least for the immediate future, 15% of U.S. oil production, I imagine the shale oil companies will be out there drilling and fracking like crazy and selling everything that they can pump out of the ground. But again, there's a cost with that, and that is earthquakes, toxification of the local water and air. It does almost seem like, in many ways, the Earth is really in serious trouble. Not from human-caused global warming, but from corporate greed. Another story coming out of the SRS Rococo report talking about the death of the dollar as the global reserve currency, saying that it is accelerating. And the end of the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency will have a negative impact on the lives of most Americans. Yes, it will, because the value of that dollar was based mostly on other nations needing to acquire it to trade in resources and banking across the border. And we have already seen a significant part of the world turn away from that. And it's starting to accelerate. And on the day when the rest of the world says we're not going to use the dollar anymore, we're in big, big trouble in this country. And you ought to be prepping for that as well. Because we don't really have a solid manufacturing base. Nobody wants to buy our GMO agriculture. There really isn't anything on which to base a functioning economy. Our balance of trade proves that our economy is not working. If you have a healthy, working, manufacturing, agricultural, consumer economy, your balance of trade ought to be close to zero. Right now in the United States, it's over $1.5 billion flowing out every single day. So the U.S. has literally been dumping the cost of America's standard of living on other countries, and they're getting tired of it. Now, Angela Merkel is still campaigning around Germany, pushing, for her re-election as chancellor, and she is still pushing the refugee policy, and it is really starting to become very obvious this is an election loser. Apparently, she got heckled twice in the same day as she was out there whistle-stopping around Germany, trying to get some support for her re-election. And the people in the crowd were screaming, Merkel must go away, protect basic law from Merkel. Others were saying, I used to be CDU voter, today I want to see Ms. Merkel in court. That's pretty serious stuff. The only way Angela Merkel is going to win re-election is through massive, massive election fraud here. Now, Chuck Schumer ought to learn sometimes that there are reasons to keep your mouth shut. And this is one of them. Apparently, Chuck Schumer has come on out and declared that restricting voting to American citizens is racist. No, it isn't, Chuck, because illegal isn't a race. Now, I understand where Chuck Schumer's coming from. He's a Democrat. The Democrats need those illegal immigrant voters and refugee voters to try and retake Congress next year. They had massive numbers of illegals voting last year in the election. More than enough to erase Hillary's supposed popular vote win. And Trump's Election Integrity Commission is having a very, very hard time really getting all the information they need to find out just how bad the problem is. Because everybody involved is trying to hide it, or delay it, or obfuscate it. But for Chuck Schumer to come on out and say that to have the American elections restricted to American citizens is racist, basically shows you that, yes, he's on board with this globalist agenda. Let everybody on in, let them vote themselves, bread and circuses until the system collapses, because that's exactly what's going to happen. The illegal immigrants, the refugees, the migrants are all coming here thinking that America is a land of milk and honey, and all they have to do is vote themselves, you know, the public teat, and all will be well. Doesn't work that way. Eventually, the government runs out of other people's money. But I mean, that really is absurd. To sit there and say that requiring that only American citizens vote in the American elections is racist, that really is ridiculous. Even for Schumer, this is a new low. Now this story, this is over at InfoWars, this one really bothers me because we're seeing this all over Europe and even here in the United States of America, where these migrants are just getting away with crimes that would land any of us decades in prison. So apparently over in Sweden, there's a court has refused to deport an Afghan migrant who raped a 15-year-old mentally disabled girl for an hour and a half. And they said, we're not going to deport him because he was in a bad mood about it afterwards and he had suffered hardship in his home country. I'm sorry if he suffered hardship in his own country. That doesn't give him the right to go to Sweden and start grabbing and raping girls. It doesn't work that way. Now, the girl is traumatized, doesn't want to go outside. She's afraid of any man now. And liberal Sweden said, no, we're not going to deport him. He felt really bad about what he did afterwards. Apparently not. Witnesses were saying that apparently the older migrant told the victim, from now on, if you kiss or have sex with anybody else, I will kill you. That doesn't sound like remorse to me. Now, as you know, as part of this ongoing war against leakers in general, WikiLeaks in particular, the U.S. is trying to find a way to put Chelsea Manning away in prison for a very, very long time. And the case has basically reached the penalty phase, and the government has been pushing the idea that the revelations from Chelsea Manning likely resulted in the deaths of American service personnel. Unfortunately, the government's first sentencing witness testified that no, most of the information Manning had leaked to WikiLeaks was actually low-level stuff. The only thing that was really embarrassing to the U.S. was that footage of U.S. airstrikes that killed civilians, including a TV news crew. And that to date, there is no indication that any of this information leaked out either compromised the war plans for the region or led to anybody's death. So they're already stumbling on that one. I'd like to see Chelsea Manning get on out. I'd like to see Assange get on out. Now, this is kind of weird. This is more insanity from the politically correct people. This is down in Australia, which means America's insanity is unfortunately spreading across the globe. And there's a lady named Red Ruby Scarlett. Yes, that is her real name. She has a PhD in early childhood studies. And she has launched a campaign to rename Father's Day because she thinks Father's Day is unfair for kids who don't have dads. And so she wants to rename the holiday to Special Persons Day. Now, this shows that this is an attack on fathers in general, because the reality is that many children do not have mothers. They will die in childbirth, or they will leave, or they'll be declared unfit and custody given to the father. But this lady isn't talking about renaming Mother's Day. Oh, no, it's only the Father's Day we want to take away. Now, if you want to have Mother's Day, Father's Day, and Special Persons Day all together, I'm on board with that. For all of us Hanai, uncles, and aunts who are parts of families that we don't have blood relations with, but we still go on over there and make silly faces at the children. That would be cool. That would be very cool. But the idea of just saying, we're going to erase the idea of Father's Day, that's a slap in the face of all the fathers who are still fathers, who are there day after day, going to their jobs, coming home at night, providing for their families. Why take their holiday away from them? on this idea that it's unfair to the children who don't have fathers. If you think about it, everything in society is unfair to somebody. Are you simply going to erase all of civilization so that nobody has to feel bad? And yes, that's a reductio ad absurdum argument, but that's exactly where political correctness is going. To the absolute erasure of anything about our civilization and culture on the theory that somebody somewhere on the planet is going to be upset by it. Now, as you know, Donald Trump has drawn a lot of criticism over his reversing the previous policy regarding surplus military weapons, battlefield weapons, war weapons, being given to civilian police. This includes armored vehicles, grenade launchers, all that kind of stuff. And now we are hearing that there is a plan to start replacing manned police helicopters with military drones by 2025. I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm not thrilled with the idea of having military drones, especially armed ones, overhead. And that's where they're going to go with this. It almost feels sometimes like the U.S. government has declared war on we, the American people. It's declaring war on the constitutional republic. It's declaring war on freedom itself. Are they that afraid of us? I mean, I'm certainly not encouraging anybody to have a revolution against this government. I think it's going to self-destruct. But this government is acting like we, the people, have become the enemy, their enemy. And that's a very uncomfortable situation. When you look at things that have happened like Waco, Texas, when you look at these staged riots to try and manipulate public opinion, you realize what a Machiavellian system really resides there in Washington, D.C. And by the way, if you've never read The Prince, I'm sure you can find it online. Sometimes, I got to tell you, looking at Washington, D.C., makes Game of Thrones look like Sesame Street. It is a big stinking mess. And like I said, right now it looks to me like the government is circling the wagons around a big, deep, dark, black, rotted secret that they're concerned could actually bring the government down if it ever comes out. And it seems like anytime anybody gets close to it, it's headed off. The FBI won't release the rest of Hillary's emails. Nobody's interested. Of course we're interested. Not only interested, we have a right to those public records. That's work product. The FBI does not really have a right to withhold them from the American people. Certainly not on such a flimsy excuse. We're going to take a break here for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Just checking back on the aftermath of Tropical Storm Harvey. Apparently the cities of Beaumont and Port Arthur, Texas, 100 miles to the east of Houston, are now flooded. Apparently Port Arthur is completely flooded, and there's rescue operations having to take place over there as well. It is a huge, huge mess. All right, let's get into science and health issues here. We're seeing more and more of these stories where teenagers are getting vaccinated for illnesses and then they come down with the illnesses. And of course, every time that happens, the corporate media won't report it. So we're looking at this story out of Natural News where apparently teenage girls died of meningitis after getting vaccinated against meningitis. This is becoming an ongoing pattern. We've seen this with all these so-called mumps and measles outbreaks last year, where there'll be an outbreak of illness at like a dorm or college or something like that, and they'll say, "Oh, see, this proves you've got to get your vaccines." And then you find out everybody who's come down with the measles and mumps had just gotten the shots for measles and mumps. The conclusion is inescapable. The vaccines are not preventing the disease, they are bringing the disease on. And then the pharmaceutical corporations will use that outbreak to stimulate more sales. So apparently there was this high school senior, Kimberly Coffey, came home from school one day complaining of body aches and fever. Her health deteriorated. She ended up on life support after her organs failed. And she died and was buried just 3 days before her high school graduation. And she got buried in the prom dress she never got to wear. And her mother said she couldn't believe the diagnosis of meningitis because she'd received the vaccine. Another one, 19-year-old Emily Stillman, college sophomore, body aches and headache. ER doctors initially thought she was suffering from a migraine, but a spinal tap performed after she lost consciousness revealed she had meningitis. The excuse they have there is, oh, well, the vaccine doesn't prevent against all strains of the illness. You can still get the illness. You know, we're just selling you partial protection. Anything for a buck here. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Ken in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I want to back you up one story and talk about giving military weapons to the police. I think that instead of just opening it up to just the police, they should open it up to all of us. If you're a law-abiding citizen that is able to own a firearm in this country, you should be able to own an MRAP.
Boy, do you know what the mileage on those things are?
Yeah. But
yeah.
My point is, you know, if they have it, you know, and the military has it, and we were supposed to have everything the military had because we were the military.
There was actually a Supreme Court decision that said the Second Amendment reserves to the American people the same weapons held by the military, United States versus Miller. Anyway, Ken, got to let you go. Got to do a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And, apparently flooding already starting in Louisiana. This is not over yet by a tiny bit. And again, the issue of gouging, a lot of people are just appalled at this very obvious effort to exploit the disaster for a fast buck here. And apparently Best Buy, a case of water, $42. And it's just horrible. And they're saying on a normal day you would get the same case of water for $5 or maybe $6. And this crisis hits and the price goes right through the roof. I think there ought to be an anti-gouging law. And I know this because we saw exactly the same thing in Southern California. Claire and I went through the Northridge earthquake. And because we, even back then, were preppers, we got through it with a minimum of upset. But we had a lot of neighbors who were caught completely off guard. And we were hearing all these stories about how bottled water was just insanely expensive. The prices were up like 5, 6, 10 times for basic food and water. And we were not in a position to be able to share with everybody in the entire apartment building, obviously. There were a few people we were close with that we, shared with and said, don't tell anybody. Last thing we need is a crowd of people pounding on our door. But again, how people react in a crisis like this tells you everything you need to know about them. Because the facades come off, and you see who was truly a humanitarian, and who was really just a predator amongst us all. Now, getting on back to the medical news, and by the way, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. The government, even with all these disasters, or maybe because of these vaccine disasters and the growing public awareness, the government is trying to fast-track this mandatory vaccination. And the media, of course, is attempting to shout down any criticism whatsoever. And all of this is a violation of the principle of voluntary informed consent, which is in the Nuremberg Code written after World War II. Now, this was put in there because of the Nazi medical experiments on prisoners. And the voluntary informed consent was that if somebody in the government wants to carry out any kind of a medical treatment on anybody, they have to sit down and say, this is what it's going to do. Do I have your consent? And if you do not consent, they cannot move forward. Now, obviously, what we have here is a situation where they're making a lot of claims about these vaccines, which very often turn out not to be true, and we're not given that principle of a right of refusal. This is a war crime being committed on the American people by the U.S. government, all to prop up the pharmaceutical industry. At the very least. At the very worst, there's something else in those vaccines they don't want us to know about. And it wouldn't be the first time that's happened. There have been many times where so-called free vaccine campaigns in the third world turned out to actually be sterilizing the women so they couldn't have babies. Who knows what the mandatory vaccines they're giving our kids are going to do to them? Now, over in Italy, millions of Italians have been demonstrating since June. The demonstrations are still going on, saying it is an infringement of their parental right to not let them decide what medications their children do or do not get. And they're absolutely right about it. Now, here's another reason to be concerned. The FDA has made an interesting comment about the smallpox vaccine. And it had to do with the FDA attacking a treatment program that involved use of the smallpox vaccine mixed with something else. And buried in that press release, there was this statement from the FDA. Serious health problems, including those that are life-threatening, can also occur in people who have problems with their heart or immune system if they become infected with the smallpox vaccine virus, either by being vaccinated or by being in close contact with a person who was vaccinated. The FDA states that those with certain prior health conditions who pick up the smallpox virus as a result of vaccination are at extremely high risk. Among those prior health conditions is immune system problems. So this is the FDA admitting there is a virus in the smallpox vaccine, that it is active, that it can cause serious medical problems and even death for people who have compromised immune systems. And yet, from 1966 to 1980, there was this massive smallpox eradication campaign carried out in Africa. They gave out 100 million doses of the smallpox vaccine to Africans, many of whom already had compromised immune systems. And by the way, it was from that specific smallpox vaccine campaign that we saw the emergence of the AIDS epidemic. And if you look at the HIV virus, it looks like a cross between bovine leukemia virus and sheep Visna virus, which makes perfect sense because the smallpox vaccine being handed out in Africa wasn't made in a modern clean lab. They set up these shacks. And they drew blood from cows that had smallpox, but also had bovine leukemia. And the virus was cultured on sheep livers from sheep that had the Visna virus. Ideal conditions for a spontaneous recombination. It was reckless, and I think that's where the AIDS epidemic actually began. It was a hideous accident from sloppy lab techniques during a mandated vaccination campaign. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining us in our third hour here, and we're going to grab a couple of phone calls. Yvonne in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Mike. I wanted to comment. I know you already talked about Joel Osteen, but I just wanted to say I went on his Twitter page. What a disgusting disgusting man. I went on his Twitter page to see what, he was tweeting. He was asking for donations before even saying that his doors were open. 2 days ago, he was on Twitter saying, oh, this is how you can donate to us. And then an article said that he wanted to be a distribution center, so he was looking to take in money and funding before he even opened his door, was shamed into opening his doors. And that's, Claire probably knows this, but I just had to say, this man, okay, has obviously never read the Bible. There's actually, in James chapter 2, it actually says, if somebody is naked and destitute of daily food, and you say to him, depart in peace and be warmed, but you don't give him what he needs, you're a horrible person. Paraphrasing. He actually says on his Twitter page, oh, be in peace, have peace. Like, he's actually doing word for word what it says in his Bible that he's preaching not to do. What a horrible, horrible, horrible human being. And I know you already said it, but I just wanted to elaborate on that. And also, just really quick, you were talking about the AIDS virus.
Yes.
Somebody wrote, do you know who it was? They made a movie out of it. No, they made a TV show out of it. It was a gay man, and he actually ended up dying from AIDS, but he wrote a book called, I think it was The Last Dance. Do you know what I'm talking about? They made a TV series about it.
Vague recollection about it, but yes.
Because he was right there, and it's a really, really good book. I don't think the TV series did it justice, but he was right there. He was in the gay community where the outbreak, took place. And he says in the book that the CDC, Center for Disease Control, was sending vans to the gay bars to collect blood.
Yes.
Right? For donations to put. Oh, so you heard about that?
Well, I know the CDC was collecting blood. I don't know. I don't think it was donor blood for transfusion, but they were definitely taking blood samples trying to track the illness. The reason the AIDS epidemic exploded so quickly in North America, it all tracked back to a single patient, Zero, who was a steward for Air Canada. And this guy was flying all over Canada and the United States, and he knew he was ill, but he was still hitting all those gay bathhouses. And this one guy, literally jump-started the disease into hundreds and hundreds of victims.
But then after that happened, right? Because he writes all about that in the book. He writes all about,
Yes.
Patient Zero and all of that stuff. But then he talks about going to the gay bathhouses and the fact that the CDC was aware of the fact they called it the gay cancer?
Yes.
It was being called GRID, I think, the gay cancer, right? And the CDC knew that they had this disease, and yet they were collecting blood from them. And that was, at best, reckless, I think, for the CDC to do. But
well, it depends on what the CDC was going to use the blood for. I mean, if they, if you're going to try and track this illness down, you need blood from infected people to work with. I remember at the time, CDC was literally in a race with the Pasteur Institute to identify the pathogen. And obviously, there'd be huge profits from identifying and then patenting the pathogen and getting a treatment. There are a lot of people who think that because of that race, that sense of competition, that desire to get where they were going, that they may have, in fact, identified the wrong pathogen. And that's why so many of these so-called cures and treatments for AIDS have not really worked.
Right. Yeah, that's right. You're just jogging my memory. He wrote about that in the book. I remember that.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
We're going to switch over to Kathy in Missouri. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hi, Mike. I am having a discussion with someone trying to figure out who's right, okay? And they're a finance person, and we were talking about the Fed and this and that, and I apologize if this is in your video. I haven't had a chance to watch it.
Yes.
But they were saying, well, it really goes back to 1825. They're one of these Bostonian types. The Ivy League can be quite arrogant, and I'm basically trying to win the argument. So I've done a lot of research online, and I see the Panic of 18. Is there anything in 1825 that would have affected the U.S. banks to get us to where we are now? That was a result of the panic in England, or was there a separate incident in the United States in 1825 that I'm not aware of or have forgotten about?
Well, basically, in 1825, the U.S. had come out of the War of 1812, and that, unfortunately, even though they won the War of 1812 was launched by Britain over the U.S. Congress refusal to renew the charter for the first bank of the United States. So they launched that war. The U.S. won it, but they left the U.S. government in so much debt they had no choice but to charter the second bank of the United States. And so they were in the middle of that, leading to Andrew Jackson's campaign to run for his second term in office, at which point he made his platform all about shutting down that second bank.
Right, but 1825 is not a date that comes up regarding any of those events. When I do my searches, I did DuckDuckGo, and I've read enough. I've read some of the books that you guys talk about 20, 30 years ago.
Yes.
And I mean, I even read Duisberg's book, but I read Ellison's book before Duisberg had it pulled, Why We Will Never Win the War Against AIDS. I mean, I was 28 years old or something, ordering these books from the Library of Congress because, I had blood transfusions and I've been to Haiti, and, I just basically did my research. And my mother, being an epidemiology nurse and a risk manager, she was on staff as a epidemiology nurse when HIV came out. Okay, so I knew all about it a couple of years before anyone knew about it. So anyway, but I don't see 1825 in the U.S. I don't see that as a trigger event for anything. I see dates around it, but not that date in particular. So I just wanted to run that by you, and I appreciate your time.
All right. Okay, we're fine there. Thank you very much for the phone call. And yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. Really bad phone connection there. Yeah, I'm looking at all wars or bankers' wars, and I'm seeing a lot of stuff around that date, but nothing specifically on that date. But it definitely covers the period of time where the U.S. was forced to accept the second bank of the United States, and it did create a huge amount of hostility. Okay, back to the phones. Janet in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
One quick mention from Rush Limbaugh today that General McMaster has now blocked the ban from President Trump on transgenders in the military. That's all I have to say.
Okay, would you run that one by us one more time?
Announced by Rush Limbaugh earlier today, General McMaster has blocked President Trump's ban on transgenders in the military. He feels it needs more study.
Okay. I mean, I can see the obvious political correct dimension there, but there have already been studies, forget about the transgenders, there have already been studies that were done with mixed gender units versus same gender units, and the results were always that the same gender units were more efficient and worked together better because they identified with each other. And if that's a problem with just mixed gender, I can imagine what it's going to be with mixed orientation as well. So this is pandering to PC-ness at the expense of the efficiency of our fighting force, and I don't agree with that. Janet, thank you very much.
Well, I have adult sons, and they don't have health insurance, but it's nice that they want more of my tax money to pay for these people. I'm thrilled. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Somebody just sent me this. Remember Charlie Hebdo, where they were this French magazine that was coming out with these very offensive covers about the Pope and about Jesus and certainly always about Muslims, and they're the champions of free speech and everything. They've just come out with a new cover showing the flooding in Texas. And all that is sticking above the water are Nazi flags and the Nazi saluting hands. This is their idea of humor. So, getting on back to the science and health issues, this is an interesting development. Apparently, on July 10th, there was a decision by the Office of Special Masters of the U.S. Court of Federal Claims, otherwise known as the Vaccine Court. Now, let me rewind a bit and tell you what the vaccine court is all about. In the Homeland Security Act, there was a provision that rendered vaccine manufacturers immune to civil litigation from harm caused by their product. No matter what their vaccines did to you, you couldn't sue them. The theory put forward, or at least the excuse put forward, was in the event of a national emergency or an act of terror, these companies would have to fast-track their vaccines, and they needed legal protection in case somebody made a mistake. No, they just wanted to have the same kind of product indemnification computers have. So instead of being able to sue the vaccine companies directly, everybody who had a complaint about vaccines was required to go to the vaccine court. And overwhelmingly, the vaccine court fines for the vaccine manufacturers. However, there has been a development. Back on July 10th, the vaccine court ruled that sufficient evidence was put forth in a specific case for them to rule that a vaccination caused a child to die from sudden infant death syndrome. The corporate media, of course, is ignoring this. This is huge because for a lot of years, people have been saying this sudden infant death syndrome is caused by bad vaccines, too many vaccines. And the vaccine manufacturers are saying, you're being silly, it's ridiculous. The parents shook the baby to death. That's it was shaken baby syndrome. And a lot of parents, already traumatized by the loss of their child, have been sent to prison to protect the profits of the vaccine industry. And now we have the vaccine court itself admitting and recognizing that, yes, the vaccinations themselves can cause children to die from sudden infant death syndrome. On this point alone, vaccines ought to be optional. But it almost seems like every time there's a new revelation on how dangerous these vaccines are, the more there's a push to make them mandatory. We don't care if they're killing you and messing you up. You will have your 40 shots or you're going to go to jail. Sig heil, sig heil, sig heil. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And somebody just wrote on in saying, is Robert Kennedy Jr. still the head of Trump's Vaccine Safety Committee? I haven't heard word one from him, nor will you. The corporate media, which is heavily dependent on advertising revenues from those vaccine manufacturers, will never, ever touch that story. If you're going to find out what's going on with the vaccines, you have to come to the independent media. That's why we're independent. We're not under their control. We're going to take a phone call. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm actually the poster boy for these poisons that pharmaceutical companies peddle. On 3 separate occasions, I've had problems with, when I was 3, the night I was vaccinated, I went into convulsions when my mother was giving me a bath, and I almost died. The only thing that saved me was I was in the bath water to cool my brain. I ended up in the hospital for about 3 weeks. When I was 11 and had my first fluoride treatment, I was in the hospital for almost a month. I almost died. And when I was 32, I went in for hay fever shots. And the second to last shot, the doctor had hit a vein and dosed me with the stuff right in my bloodstream. And, of course, my heart rate went up, my blood pressure went through the roof. I could have stroked out. Mm-hmm. But he even admitted, like the next doctor's appointment, that this is how problems happen with needles. It doesn't really matter what the needle is. And I've talked to you about this before. These intermuscular shots, if they do hit a vein, it's hit and miss. You could live or die. And, I mean, are people comfortable with that? That those kind of odds, like a 50-50 chance at that point. It's crazy.
It is.
Why did they do this? Just to make a buck.
Yeah, that's exactly it. They're doing this to make a buck. The medical industrial complex decided there wasn't enough money in making treatments and medicines for sick people, so they were going to sell medicine to perfectly healthy people and get the government to make it mandatory. As I've said before, it's just like the old traveling Wild West medicine show. Run the wagon into the middle of the town, crank down that backstage, come on out to tell a scary story about a disease on the other side of the Great Plains and sell them bottles of pepper oil.
That's hilarious. here's the bitter irony about some of this, Mike. I've only had one cavity in my life.
Yes.
And it's like the size of a diamond. It's in one of my back molars. You know, like it's so small. I'm the one that noticed it and went to the doctor or went to the dentist. And I've had the same dentist since I was a child when this happened. And you know, I mean, afterwards I was never allowed anywhere near sodium fluoride, and even the toothpastes I use were sodium fluoride free.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's a big lie. It's an absolute lie. I've seen people in the United States when I used to travel down there a lot that had, you know, the classic overfluoridation type of thing with their teeth. They were, you know, like rotting and white splotches and stuff like that. And, you know, one time I had to ask, what happened to your teeth? And that person said fluoride.
Yep.
So, I mean, like, you know, if these smelters want to peddle their poison and try and, you know, put it in our water, I mean, this is just crazy. Up here in Canada, it's perfectly acceptable. I know a lot of places in the United States, they're fighting it, and they're winning, and that's great. That's a you know, what, I suspect in Canada they're going to try and put lithium in the water next.
Oh, the BBC is already pushing that. The BBC is pushing that now. Luckily, here in Hawaii, they stopped fluoridation back in the 1990s because of the recognition that drinking fluoride does not, in fact, have any effect on tooth decay. It acts as a mild tranquilizer, and that may have been the real agenda all along, to keep us all tranquilized and docile and just not able to really get that emotional energy necessary to stand up and say to the government, we think that you're doing a bad job. But again, it's all about a fast buck. And that's really what fascism is all about. Corporate greed and government authority in perfect alignment against the general population to simply milk them for every cent they can get, and to heck with concerns about health or longevity or anything like that. Al, we got to let you go and take a break for commercials. Mike. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently some of the flood victims for Harvey have really reached the breaking point with all the media that's all over there. And the media's down there with cameras and microphones and, oh, give us a moment for the network. And apparently at one point, CNN was trying to interview this woman, and the woman just exploded on them, saying, you're exploiting the hurricane for audience numbers. You know, what's wrong with you people? She's absolutely right there. There was a rock song a while back called Dirty Laundry, which really, I thought, conveyed a good impression of what the corporate media is all about. If it bleeds, it leads. If it thinks, it stinks. Now, getting on back to the medical news. And yes, it does seem sometimes like they're just putting out any old product they can get away with for a fast buck, and to heck with the long-term consequences. I mean, we certainly get that impression where we'll see a commercial for a new medication or a new procedure, immediately followed by the ambulance chaser commercials saying, if you took that medication and you are in trouble, you may be entitled to a cash settlement. So it's just nothing about churning the money like crazy. And the latest one is coming out of Bayer, and it's a contraceptive implant called Assure. It's a coil implant that works to deliberately trigger inflammation in the fallopian tubes, which will build up scar tissue that blocks the eggs from reaching the womb, which sounds kind of like a non-reversible way of doing this. And they're saying it is a form of permanent sterilization. And unfortunately, the device has been found to be puncturing holes in the fallopian tube and even becoming dislodged and being embedded somewhere else in the body. And apparently some women are reacting badly to the device's materials, which include nickel and polyester. And depending upon how it fastens to the interior of the woman, it can only be removed by taking out the oviduct, the fallopian tubes, or in some cases an entire hysterectomy. Wonderful, wonderful product here that they have put out there. But it makes money. Supposedly there's a new high-tech treatment for cancer out there, $500,000 a pop. All right, let's grab a phone call here. Tom in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day, Michael. Michael, I saw a Drudge Report and it says hell's froze over. Nancy Pelosi's talking about the anti-leftist.
Yes.
Communists, the Bolsheviks. Michael, what I was want to know, I heard there's a big lawsuit going on and just try to sue CNN for calling all of Trump's 64 million voters racist and all this.
Yes.
And I think I would like to join on to that lawsuit because I think what the media has done, CNN especially, they should be sued and they should be put out of business because they're a bunch of communist news network Bolsheviks that are the Hillary Clinton news network or whatever you want to call it. I believe that they should be sued and they should be right out of existence for their filth that comes out of their filthy mouths, like Rachel Madcow and all these Madcow leftists they got.
Well, you need to look at the way the laws are written here. First of all, CNN is going to scream that they have a First Amendment right to say that we're all deplorables and racists and so forth and so on. And the ability to collect on a civil suit for defamation, you have to prove CNN intended malice toward the target of the story, which is kind of hard when the target of the story represents a significant portion of the entire population.
Michael, another thing. Yes.
I was going to say,
Michael. Another thing I want you to know, Michael. I did a FBI statistics study on the computer.
Yes.
And I looked at the 10 cities with murder rates of crime with like Black Lives Matter. You know what I came to the conclusion? There's 5,870. You can check it out. 5,874 murders this year alone in all the 10 largest cities in the United States. The murder rate. There's over 5,000, almost 6,000 murders. Now, if it was the opposite way. Could you imagine?
I'm sorry, what do you mean by the opposite way?
Well, I mean by the opposite way, if it was white, let's put it this way, if whites were killing blacks, then it's kind of substantial numbers. It would be in the news media 24 hours a day. Since it's black on black crime, you don't hear nothing about it.
No,
if you had white people killing 100 of them, it'd be all over the news for the next century. It's unbelievable.
Okay, well, Tom, take a deep breath here because I'm coming in on this thing. Yeah, the corporate media is always pushing the white on black crime. They'll ignore the black on black crime. They'll even ignore the black on white crime because they're pushing an agenda. And we're seeing the continuation of that agenda with this whole Black Lives Matter and Antifa and this ludicrous idea that whites ought to surrender their wealth to the blacks. It's just like we saw down in Zimbabwe. Now, the good news is this whole thing appears to be stumbling rather badly.
Michael, you're right. Very good.
All right. Well, Tom, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. And one of our listeners was kind enough to call on in with a specific movie reference. It was called And the Band Played On, Politics, People, and the AIDS Epidemic. And it was a 1987 book by San Francisco Chronicle journalist Randy Schultz, and then it was made into a TV movie in 1993. And it is definitely worth seeing, and it's got a stellar cast of people who happen to be gay, like Lily Tomlin and Richard Gere, and just did these amazing performances. I think... I can't remember. It's a great cast, and it's a great movie, and it's a very accurate story. And it talks about this patient zero, this air steward for Air Canada, who knew he was ill, knew that he had this disease, and yet he was flying all over Canada and the United States. And on the layovers, he would go to the local gay bathhouses and do what they do or did do in the gay bathhouses, completely unconcerned. And his attitude was, if I have the disease, why shouldn't everybody? And it was extraordinarily irresponsible and reckless attitude for anybody to have. And then they were talking about, the book goes into the fight about closing the bathhouses, which were obviously centers of infection for this whole situation. And the liberals turn it into an issue of gay suppression. We're allowed to have these bathhouses. You're trying to put us back in the closet. Well, just to keep things in focus, there were no heterosexual bathhouses at that time. So that's kind of how that got out of control. And the other part of the book, and this is really the important part, was the intense competition between the CDC and the Pasteur Institute to identify and patent the specific pathogen causing AIDS. And they may have jumped the gun and there is still a concern to this day, that the human immunodeficiency virus that has been identified may not, in fact, be the sole cause of acquired immune deficiency syndrome. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Larry in Washington State, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Have you ever read Dr. Lorraine Day's book about AIDS?
No.
You know who Dr. Lorraine Day is?
Doesn't ring a bell.
Jeez. Okay, she was a chief orthopedic surgeon down in San Francisco General during the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
She had to work in the moon suit.
Yes.
Because of blood contamination. And in that, this is prior to that flight attendant, whatever, the young man.
Mm-hmm.
At her and I think it was Leonard Horowitz talked about AIDS was a actual disease that was implemented, and Kissinger got it passed to find this, an autoimmune disease, and that it was, they asked for volunteers in New York, San Francisco, and some other place to get these hepatitis B shots.
Yes.
That were carrying the AIDS virus. And it wasn't started by any flight attendant having sex with 100 people at one of the bathhouses.
Well, if I recall correctly, and it's been a long time since I've looked at this material, the hepatitis B shots were occurring at about the same time that this flight attendant was doing his thing. And in all cases, it appeared that the AIDS virus came into this country from African immigrants who were then basically spreading it through the hepatitis shots, and it got into these other blood supplies because they didn't know the pathogen was there until it started showing a specific set of symptoms, and that's when CDC and Pasteur began to really look for a unique pathogen that was causing these symptoms. But yeah, the creation and the initial introduction of AIDS or the virus was just one bad decision after another, after another, after another. It was a cascade of poor decision making.
Then you don't think it was planned?
No. I think it was created as an accident during that rush job smallpox vaccine campaign in Africa. I don't think they were expecting it at all.
Then you believe that it was some monkey that bit a black over there that...
No, I didn't say that. You're not listening to me.
You're implying it.
No, I didn't imply it at all. You're clearly not listening to my show. I went through the whole explanation earlier of how I suspect that AIDS was an accidental creation of the smallpox vaccine program in Africa because of the sloppy lab techniques being used to create the vaccines. Larry, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. We're getting up here to the top of the show, and I got a bunch of stuff to get to here. Speaking of diseases and illnesses, apparently there is a major outbreak of hepatitis A among the homeless population of San Diego, and it's believed to be the deadliest eruption of the infectious disease in the United States since the Centers for Disease Control launched its monitoring program back in 1998. So there is another wonderful gift of the open borders agenda. We now have hepatitis A exploding in Southern California. Gee, isn't it wonderful? All right, we're going to take a phone call. Walter in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I just wanted to talk about the flood. When you talk about development, and I know there's like a lot of, I know there's a libertarian sort of bent to this show and everything, but when it comes to like development and planning, I think this is a good example of why you do need, regulations and those type of things for planning, especially for land use planning, because this is going to be the results if you don't, plan properly. So I just wanted to mention that. And I'm not saying that you have to like over-regulate, but there does need to be, and I know you talk a lot about like GMOs and those types of things, regulations. So I'm just making the point that you do have to have some type of regulation, because if you don't, the market, the capitalists, that frame of mind will overreign, science and what things that make sense for the future. So that's my point.
Well, you're absolutely right. In its ideal condition, regulation is going to basically keep corporations from doing things that are harmful to the public. Regulation is going to constrain land use to things that will preserve that land for future generations. Unfortunately, as a nation descends into fascism, regulation becomes another tool or weapon to be used in the wars between corporations, where corporations go to various politicians and say, we need a regulation that limits what our enemies are doing. And the congressman will push that through. And then the other guy says, well, we need a regulation to fight back, to retaliate. And so regulations stop being about controlling the nation for the common good and become just another political weapon. And that's when it's out of control.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Apparently, over at that Arkema chemical plant, the CEO, Richard Rowe, is saying there is no way they're going to be able to prevent an explosion. The plant is heavily flooded. It's only a matter of time before the chemicals on site are going to react to the water and things are going to go bang. So what a horrible, horrible, horrible disaster that this has turned out to be. I think this would be a good time for the United States federal government to rethink its foreign policy and realize that we need to start bringing all of our people back home, all of our money back home, and put this nation to rights before we dare presume to go to other countries and tell them how to live. Because the U.S. government is out there conquering all these other countries, and our country, the United States of America, has clearly decayed to the point of outright danger and risk to everybody. It is clear that the flood control was inadequate, the preparations were inadequate, the drainage was inadequate, the municipal water systems were not well enough protected. Anyway. Okay, now somebody is sounding off a warning that broadband providers could steal details about your private life using data from smart devices, the Internet of Things, cameras, sleep monitors, even sex toys. They're starting to make sex toys that hook to the Internet. Why on earth would you want to do that? But it represents another way for the bad guys to get information about you. Security researchers at Moscow-based Positive Technologies have identified an undocumented configuration setting that disables the Intel Management Engine 11, a CPU control mechanism that has been Intel's ME, that has been described as a security risk. Intel's ME consists of a microcontroller that works with the platform controller hub chip. It's a digital controller in conjunction with integrated peripherals. It handles much of the data traveling between the processor and external devices, and thus has access to most of the data on the host computer. If compromised, it becomes a backdoor, giving an attacker control over the affected devices. Now, I'm wondering, since this appears to be a hardware undocumented feature, if this is something mandated by the National Security Agency. Now, if you're an engineer and you're using LabVIEW software to design machines or industrial equipment, you should be very cautious about opening any virtual instrument file, because apparently LabVIEW has an unpatched flaw that will allow hackers to hijack your computer, steal your business design, steal your instrument design, get to market with it quicker than you can. It really is absolutely embarrassing how wide open and weak our IT infrastructure is, apparently at the behest of the government itself. You don't need privacy for your products and inventions. Our need to keep an eye on you supersedes that. No, it doesn't. Read your Fourth Amendment. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program here today. And apparently Russia and China are about to sign an agreement on joint space exploration that will cover the period from 2018, next year, to 2022. This will include sending manned missions to the moon for the first time since the Apollo program. And it is being signed against the background of a new space race that the U.S. is out there trying to win. It's not about peaceful space research only. Now, I am not opposed to a new space race, for two reasons. One, I would rather have all these belligerent powers settling their differences out there in the outer reaches of space than down here on the ground, where people get caught in the crossfire. Second, and I've made this point before, the economic boom of the 70s, 80s, and 90s was all based on technology developed getting the Apollo spacecraft to the moon and back. The Apollo program was a civilian technology incubator, and I emphasize civilian. We know there are technology incubators for the military, but they hang on to their goodies. By the time any of that technology gets declassified, it's so obsolete, it's useless. There's not much point bringing it to the marketplace anymore. But with NASA during Apollo, as they came up with new stuff and put it out there, it was immediately available to the American people to start new businesses with. And that's where it all began. With the microchip, the microcomputer, all of that. Even today, it's hard to point to anything in your home and not trace its family lineage back to the Apollo project. So I'm fully on board with that, so that we can leapfrog ahead and regain our manufacturing. Because we're not going to catch up just making what everybody else is making. And unfortunately, if Russia and China are joining together and they're getting the new technologies, then they're going to get the new industries and the new customer bases as well. I am getting very frustrated with NASA, who are hemming and hawing and dancing around the question of life on Mars. And so there's this new article that's out in Exchange magazine about how minerals on Mars indicate crater was suitable for microbes. And the story goes on how this vast area on Mars once not only had water, but provided the conditions needed for microbes to exist. And they're just dancing around this whole issue. Now, the Viking lander and Dr. Gilbert Levin's labeled release experiment confirmed the presence of indigenous life all the way back in 1976. And for whatever political reasons, NASA decided to ignore it. They based their conclusion Mars was lifeless on the results from the gas chromatograph mass spectrometer device, which we now know couldn't have possibly worked. There was a design flaw. It didn't take into account the presence of perchlorates in the Martian soil. And so it's very frustrating to see all these people could have had life. Maybe these look like microbes. These could be fossil microbes. Could be. Maybe. Somebody take a stand. Put their name on it and say there is or is not life on Mars. All right, there's the music. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a good evening. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. Aloha, America.